Hi there, my name is Chris Stoneman. I'm a CTO and co-founder of Care Security, and today I'm going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, AWS log forensics and incident response. So I thought it was a pretty funny tweet from Florian Roth, always a fun figure on Twitter. Is DFIR in the cloud just logging? And a lot of it is, and that's exactly what we're talking about now. My view would be it's not just logging. It also depends if you're talking about things like the metadata of the cloud, inside the compute, all that kind of good stuff. So diving straight into it, what is CloudTrail? CloudTrail you've probably seen before in terms of looking at API calls, particularly things like IAMs, the kind of metadata around the access of permissions that you're trying to do. Here you can see here some recent IAM events. And to dive in and tell you what that actually looks like, a bit more detail here. Here is a CloudTrail log, so JSON format. In this case, you're seeing the API calls at S3, including things like the permissions. So who did it? So the full resource name of the role that did the S3 access there. Versus Cloudwatch. So here are some examples of Cloudwatch logs. In this case, it's from a load balancer or a web server. And Cloudwatch, generally you're looking at things like high-level metrics when you summarize this to work out, are things running fast or slow. And also diving down to things like the actual logs inside those systems too. So CloudTrail more on the API calls, that kind of like control plane. You might have a special guest speaker.
Oh, hello.
What do you think about Cloudwatch?
Are you recording?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hey, everyone. Cloudwatch. Oh, well, that's all about getting all the telemetry from how your systems are performing and all those sorts of bits and pieces. And then you're talking about CloudTrail as well?
Yeah, perfect. There you go. We got a skip over this. There you go.
CloudTrail, yeah, I like that. Yeah, no, really important to define the difference, actually. So, and CloudTrail is super important to understand what's going on in your environment at the kind of next level, because like one thing that a lot of customers do, they've got like real-time monitoring on their actual endpoints. So like whether it's containers or like an EC2 as an example. But what happens if someone breaks out of that and actually like creates like an IAM account or starts playing with the AWS API? So this is where CloudTrail really comes in handy. And we've definitely seen that before with hackers breaking out and stuff. That's
so
cool.
You see the start in CloudWatch and the end of CloudTrail.
That's cool. I've got to head to a meeting, but thanks for letting me invade, and hopefully everybody enjoys this. So ask lots of questions in the comments.
Yes, please do. Thank you. Good luck.
Ciao. Thanks.
Let me zip back then. Thank you. Yeah, so CloudWatch, a bit more kind of like metadata around, well, at a high level, the metrics around those systems, but also you can dive in and get the actual logs. You also shift the CloudWatch logs off to other systems as well. I'll show you in a second. So here's just more an example of what it looks like with Lambda functions. So if you're running Lambda functions, you get all these streams out, stored in CloudWatch. You can go through and then search through all that data too. Not the easiest interface necessarily to go through, but again, you can export this out and then search it that way. So here you can see running SQLite queries across CloudWatch via Log Insights. It's also pretty cool, and this is a resource well worth checking out. You can actually collect the OS logs from inside those systems, so perhaps inside, for example, an EC2 or container, into CloudWatch, so not just the stuff that's coming logged outside, but actually inside as well. You can even collect them on-premise systems too, and that's pretty useful to then kind of centralize that. And then you can then analyze it straight from S3, either in your SIEM, so you can probably index it, or Amazon Athena, which actually runs across the S3 data raw. I think we'll talk about that in a second as well. And yeah, just a bit of a gripe here. If you do look for where things are logging AWS, there's a good resource here, AWS logging types, this spreadsheet. It turns out that different AWS services log to different places. So CloudWatch is pretty common, S3 is pretty common, but you're also be looking at random places like here, downloading in a UTF format text document from the UI. So different places for different things. There's lots of options to monitor compute as well. So I was just showing about CloudWatch, but there are also some great open source tools. For example, OS Query from Facebook, at least originally, that can log straight into Amazon Kinesis. This is kind of dump the data off into S3. And that'll give you things like lists of what processes are running, all that kind of detail. Other slightly more old school open source stuff like Wazoo. And then also there's like a ton of commercial solutions, obviously. So everyone knows Datadog. You can store the agent and track things that way too. So you don't just have to stay AWS native in order to track data in AWS. Quick word on VPC flow logs, so you can get the kind of flow data around your VPCs, so the networks. Pretty high level, you can get the from and to address, that's about it. If you want to start looking at things like the actual packet content, then you start to need to deploy something else. But this is also how things like guard duty work as well. They'll analyze the VPC flow data, among other things. Also things like the load balancer logs. I kind of showed you some screenshots before, but you can get pretty detailed information out here. I think we're going to show you how you query this as well. Oh, yeah, the other option, of course, in terms of pulling things from S3, whether it be something like a load balancer log or something else, it's one thing you can just pull it locally, and then you can just grep that data. You can use zgrep if it's gz compressed. And there are pros and cons in terms of cost and speed here. So if you download all those logs locally, you can then run multiple queries potentially quite fast. Grep actually works, frankly, better than some other tools, but it does depend on what you're doing. You can also use something like Athena, in which case, there we go, you don't have to download it locally, but then you're potentially paying cost depending on regions, that kind of stuff each time you do these queries. So you have to be a bit careful there too. So Athena, if you haven't used it, it's pretty cool. You essentially create a SQL table based on the data in S3. So if you look at this big query at the top, creating a table at the bottom, the location, which is that location in the S3 bucket. And then you can do cool queries as soon as you create that table, things like select star from that table where the status code is 200 success code. This is what you're seeing here. Yeah, and just finally, do check out this great blog by these three great Amazon employees recently, logging strategies for security incident response. They go through bit by bit all the different services and the kind of logging you might want to enable. Obviously with an AWS tint rather than something outside of AWS, but definitely still worth checking out. Here's what Coda can do. We can import a ton of different types of log types, whether it be CloudTrail, GuardDuty, etc. And we also do that via API calls as well as from S3. So for example, in Amazon, if you were to acquire an EC2, we'd go and search the API for any CloudTrail events or other events related to that EC2, and then bring in the metadata of the EC2 along as the actual contents inside it. And that means you can see it all side by side. Same thing with Azure, it'd be things like the activity logs. And then that makes it a lot easier to analyze. You can see side by side what's happening inside the system versus outside with a kind of, again, the more cloud level logging. And yeah, if you'd like to try any of that out, we do a free 14-day trial on our website. Thank you for listening.